We're learning the second Sikha on Igeres Hateshuva in Chelek on page 399. This is the second in a series of Sikhs which explains the Rebbe's father's comments on Igeres Hateshuva. We learned the first Sikha last week, and today we'll learn the second Sikha, which will discuss the beginning of Igeres Hateshuva Perik Dalet. The shir today is being learned L'Nishmas Rabbi Yosef ben Yamin ben Rabbi Menashe Kaltman. Nachdem wie der Alte Rebbe is mevaye the protim beneged the tiniest shel tshuva. After the Alte Rebbe explains the details regarding the various different fasts required for tshuva. In the Prakim Beis and Gimel from Igeres Hateshuva, in chapters 2 and 3 in Igeres Hateshuva, is a mamshech in Onib from Perik Dalet. The Alte Rebbe continues in the beginning of Perik Dalet and says as follows: As kol anal hulagmar hakapara chulu. All of this, the various different fasts, is to complete the atonement. It doesn't define the very tshuva itself at all. Acharat tshuva chulu, and that all comes after a person did complete tshuva. Aber the inyan from tshuva gufe, however, when it comes to the actual tshuva itself. So the Alter Rebbe says, Hascholas mitzvahs hatshuva ve'ikra chulu. To understand the beginning of the mitzvah and the primary fulfillment of the mitzvah of tshuva is hahechrech levayer heitev. We must explain clearly, bar chavas abir, with a broad explanation, behektem mashakasav v'zaya, by prefacing what the Zayah says regarding the word tshuva, bebir milas tshuva al derech hasayt. According to Kabbalah, what the word of tshuva means. Tshuva, it means toshuv hey, returning the hey of the letter hey of Hashem's name when a person does an aveda, so that blemishes or that separates the hey from Hashem's holy name, Yud Kei Vav Kei. So when one does tshuva, he's returning the hey to Hashem's name. So there's hey tata, there's the last hey of Hashem's name. That's tshuva tata, that's the lower level of tshuva. And hey ilah is tshuva ilah. When you return the first hey to Hashem's name, that is a higher experience of tshuva, and that's called tshuva ilah. That's the beginning, the opening of Igeres Hateshuva, chapter 4. In seiner Oris of Tanya, in the zweite Or of Igeres Hateshuva, so in his comments on Tanya, and this is the second comment of the Rebbe's father in Igeres Hateshuva, stellt sich der Tate auf die Wörter levayer heitev bar chavas abir. So the Rebbe's father stops on these words that the Alter Rebbe says that it must be explained, and he uses this expression in Hebrew, levayer heitev and bar chavas abir. On his mevayer, and he explains what is the meaning of these expressions. So as we already learned last week, and we'll see here again, what characterizes very much the Rebbe's father's ha'aris is the attention to and the precision in every single expression, every word that the Alter Rebbe writes in Tanya. If the Alter Rebbe here is saying that it must be explained, and he uses the various words for this, it's not just some kind of flowery expression, but every word carries meaning in it. So what are these two expressions here when it says levayer heitev pahar chavas abir? It seems to be redundant. So he explains in his mevayer as the tzvei l'shonis levayer heitev bar chavas abir then a keneged the tzvei pchines tshuva tata and tshuva ilah. These are two expressions that actually correspond to what the Alter Rebbe says will be explained there, tshuva tata, the lower level of tshuva, and the higher level of tshuva. Levayer heitev is keneged pchines tshuva tata. The expression of levayer heitev is related to tshuva tata. Varum, ba'er, or it could also be read as a be'er, as a well, is meramaz of malchus, hey tata. That hints to the level of malchus, which is related to hey tata. The four letters of Hashem's holy name, Yud Kei Vav Kei, the Yud is chachma, the hey is bina, the vav are Hashem's 6 midis, and the last hey is malchus. So this is all the 10 spheres. So the second hey, which is malchus, is hinted in the existence of a well. Again, he brings there the Kabbalistic sources for this. The Rebbe points to one place in Ha'ara 7 where the expression of a be'er refers to malchus. There's various different explanations of what a be'er would mean, but here it refers to the sphere of malchus. So that's the word levayer, be'er, malchus, the last hey. When heitev, when the Alter Rebbe says that it's going to be explained well, heitev, if yisoid, za, vav. So that is hinting to the vav in Hashem's holy name, which is primarily the level of yisoid, the last of the 6 spheres, of the 6 midis that is, which is what the letter Vav. Vav is really 6, and it represents all the 6 spheres, primarily Yesod. Now that's a deeper level in Tshuva. Und Yais, as an minion von Tshuva Tata, sind dort zwei Darges, being that in Tshuva, and Tshuva Tata we're speaking about, the lower level of Tshuva, it contains 2 levels in it. It can be divided into 2. There's Tshuva Tata Gufa, was is verbunden mit Malchus. There's the level, the basic elementary level of Tshuva, which relates to the sphere of Malchus, and it relates to the last letter of the Eibishter's name, Malchus, Hey. It's one level in Tshuva Tata. And then Umbal Tshuva Tata, the one that it possesses this Tshuva, meaning he's higher than the simple level of Tshuva Tata. The source of this Tshuva Tata was the verbunden mit Yesod, Vav. That's a level up, Yesod, which is the last of the 6 midis, hinted in the letter Vav. The Faz sagt Alter Rebbe die zwei Werte Levair und Hetev. So when the Alter Rebbe is coming to explain Tshuva Tata, he says that this is going to be explained, Levair Hetev, explained well, was Weisen Kanal of Heitata, Onef und Vav, which hint to the Hey and the Vav of Hashem's name, B'chtei zu Merame sein, die zwei Proten was in Tshuva Tata. He's hinting to this, that there are 2 levels in Tshuva Tata. Okay, now, don't get worried. Everything we're learning here will be explained very, very elaborate later in the Sikhe. I was just going through over here in the beginning, the comment of the Rebbe's father, very simple and technical, but we'll see. It'll all be explained. Barchaves Abir, then when the Alter Rebbe says the term Barchaves Abir, is Leneged Tashav Heilah. This refers to a higher level of tshuva, which is returning the first Hey of Hashem's name that was blemished and disconnected through an Avera, and you're connecting it back to Hashem's name. Vodem Hey Ilah is Bina. Hey, the Ilah, the first Hey relates to Bina. As we mentioned before, the Yud is Chachma, then the Hey is Bina. On Archaves Abir, Vais of Bina Vimuvur in Dara. The expression of Archaves Abir is hinting to Bina, and the Rebbe here does not bring the Kabbalistic source for this, and the Rebbe's father explains it in his comment why Harchavas Abiyah hints to Bina, but it's hinting to this level of Tshuva Ilah. So basically, in the expression of the Alter Rebbe, Levairete Barchavas Abiyah, we have hinted 3 levels of Tshuva. Tshuva Tata, which is divided into 2, that's hinted in the last Hey and the Vav, and then in the words Barchavas Abiyah, or Harchavas Abiyah, it hints to Tshuva Ilah, which is Bina. Now the question over here on what the Rebbe's father says is as follows. Euch in Tshuva Ilah sind voran die 2 Praten, Tshuva Gufe und Bal Tshuva. In Tshuva Ilah as well, it can be divided into 2 levels. The lower level of this Tshuva, the Tshuva itself, and then the one that's the source of this Tshuva. When one reaches to the level of this Tshuva Ilah, which is higher, the source of the lower level is the Bal Tshuva Ilah. Tshuva Ilah Gufe is Bibina. Heilah. The actual Aveda of Tshuva Ilah and the lower level of it, that's in the sphere of Bina, which is hinted in the Hey. Bal Tshuva Ilah is B'chachma, Yud. This is a level of Tshuva which is reaching into the Yud of Hashem's name. Stellt sich the Shaila, if so the question is, Favos, beim Remez of Tshuva Tata, nutzt Alter Rebbe Lashon was weiß of beide Beginnes. Why, when the Alter Rebbe uses these expressions there which hint to the various levels of Tshuva, he hints to both levels of Tshuva Tata. Tshuva Tata Gufa Malchus, Bal Tshuva Tata Yesod Zah. As was explained before, the Tshuva Tata related to Malchus and the Tshuva Tata related to Yesod. Beim Rebbe of Tshuva Ilah, sagt er nur Barchavas Abir. When it comes to Tshuva Ilah, the Alter Rebbe just says the term Harchavas Abir was weiß of Tshuva Ilah Bina, which is hinting to the level of Tshuva Ilah, which is in Bina. Gufe, just that level of tshuva itself. Und nicht auf die Beginne von Bal Tshuva Ilah Chachma. And there's no hint here in the Alter Rebbe's expression to the highest level and to the 4th level of tshuva, which is the Bal Tshuva Ilah, the source of Tshuva Ilah. Why is that not hinted here? Just like when it comes to Tshuva Tata, that both levels of Tshuva Tata are hinted. Euch darf man verstehen. Another question we need to understand here in the words of the Alter Rebbe. The Werter Levai Heter Barchavas Abir, when the Alter Rebbe says that we're going to explain well, but seeing sich bepashtas oif, we're going to explain well what? It simply is connecting to what the Alter Rebbe says right afterwards, Mashikasa B'Zayir HaKadosh B'Biyah Milas Shuv Al Derech HaSayid Chulu, to explain well what it says in the Zohar regarding Tshuva, according to Kabbalah. But on the other hand, under Loshen Bahaktim, Masha Kasav B'Zayar HaKadosh Chulu, Alter Rebbe inserts this word that will preface what it says in Zayar, is mashma. So from this it seems, as durch Maktim Zayin, Masha Kasav B'Zayar HaKadosh is Eisen zum Mevayah Zayin, an Anderinyan. That when he brings the Zayar, the Alter Rebbe is bringing up a different subject here. He's going to be explaining a different subject. So it sort of disconnects from the Levayar Heter Bar Chavas Abir. Levayar Heter Bar Chavas Abir, we have to explain very well. Okay, then Bahaktim, but we have to preface what it says in the Zayar. So is the words Levayar Heter Bar Chavas Abir connected to what it says in the Zayar, or no? Bahaktim, let's first explain something else, what it says in Zayar. It's not clear over here how to read these words, Levayar Heter Bar Chavas Abir. Okay, so that's the question on what the Rebbe's father says, and another question on the expression that the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya here. Now here in Siv Beis, the Rebbe asks a very basic question here regarding what the Alter Rebbe, the content of what the Alter Rebbe is saying here in Tanya. In addition to these diyukim, which are specific questions regarding the language that the Alter Rebbe uses, is nit verstandig der klolle inyevis is up. The whole subject in general is not understood here. What is the Alter Rebbe saying? To understand the first step, the beginning and the primary level of tshuva is we must understand what the word tshuva means according to Kabbalah. Now, seemingly, why is that so? What is the basic point there about the explanation of tshuva according to the secrets of Torah? As tshuva meant, toshav hey. Tshuva refers to the fact that what's accomplished through tshuva is that hay that was blemished by the person's actions is now being returned to Hashem's holy name. Brengt nor arais. Now this explanation only explains and expresses das was wird aufgetan durch tshuva. What is being accomplished through tshuva in the spiritual realm regarding Hashem's name? As durach an aveire is memoired im heitata the shchina in galus. When he does an aveire, the action that he does in this world below is drawing down and taking away godly energy, the shchina, from its source for where it is, and it's putting it into an exile. That's the blemish in that hay, a certain level of godly revelation that's being disconnected and coming down. When a yid does a proper tshuva, is toshav heitatom mipchinas galus. So the tshuva has an effect to also return that godly revelation that got pulled down, to return it back to its place. So this is not any additional explanation in what tshuva itself consists of, in the aved of the person. It's just explaining the result of this tshuva regarding Hashem's name. But in the mitzvah of tshuva gufa was the mensch darfton, as far as the fulfillment of the mitzvah of tshuva that the person has to do, kommt nitzu durch ein Bier milas tshuva al derech hasaid Bier und Isafe Igeres lakal. So it doesn't seem like over here with the explanation that the Alter Rebbe brings according to Kabbalah of what's being accomplished through the tshuva, it doesn't add anything, at least not a main point, in what the tshuva of the person consists of in this world. Which the Alter Rebbe already explained earlier, right in the beginning, in the first perek of Igeres Tshuva, as mitzvah tshuva is, what is the beginning and main point of the mitzvah of tshuva? Aziv esachet chulu, to let go of the avera, sheyigmar beliboy belev shalom chulu, and to make a strong resolution in one's heart with an absolute fullness of his heart, not to return to that avera and to go forward, to only do what Hashem wants. That's what tshuva is. So now, the effect of this resolution, the effect of this tshuva above doesn't change seemingly the attitude and what the tshuva itself consists of. However, that when it comes to beginning with tshuva, to begin tshuva, and the primary fulfillment of tshuva, we must understand and have the explanation of tshuva al derech hasaid is mashma as akdamas habiyah from var tshuva al derech hasaid is neitik euch to das bar from mitzvah tshuva. So from this it seems that to understand just the basic mitzvah of tshuva, it's necessary to have the component of tshuva according to Kabbalah. But mitzvah tshuva is that tzivui was der adam darf mekayim sein. The mitzvah of tshuva refers to the aveda of the tshuva that the person fulfills, and this understanding about tshuva al derech hasaid will add, and not only add, but this will explain what the basic fulfillment of tshuva is. Not just add another level, another dimension to the tshuva, but this is the beginning of the tshuva, and the whole main point of this tshuva will only be understood. You must understand tshuva al pi Kabbalah. So the Rebbe is basically asking, why is this so? Why is this result of the tshuva in the Ruchniistic realm regarding the letter of Hashem's holy name, affect the attitude of the person in his Aveda of tshuva? So in Sif Gimel, the Rebbe continues and adds to this question. The Shaila is noch gresse, this question is even stronger. The Alter Rebbe bringt von Zohar Kodesh, the Alter Rebbe brings here from Zohar, nit nor as milas hatshuva al derech hasoid this toshuv hey, doesn't just bring the general basic concept that tshuva means toshuv hey, to return the hey to Hashem's name, nor oichas and dem zenen dort zwei darges. He brings the two levels in this, tshuva tata und tshuva ilah, the lower and higher level of tshuva. Das heißt, so what this would mean in other words is, as to the hasbara, von aschalas mitzvah tshuva ve'ikra chulu, for a person to understand the beginning of tshuva and the main mitzvah of tshuva, fadet sich euch die akdamas abir in tshuva ilah. You must have an understanding of the higher level of tshuva ilah. Davon verstehen, so the question here is, tshuva ilah and tshuva tata, two completely different levels of tshuva. As the Rebbe explains here in short. The Chelek from the zwei Dages, Tshuva Tata and Tshuva Ilah. What is the basic difference between these two levels of Tshuva? Is Mevayed Alter Rebbe weiter in Igeres Tshuva. So this is explained later on in Perik Ches in Igeres Tshuva. As Tshuva Tata is der Umkehr von Ayiden zu sein Friede gemein mit der Matze, wie es gewinnt, der hat gesündigt. Tshuva Tata, a person sinned and he became dirty and disconnected with his Aveda. So now Tshuva Tata is to drop that Aveda and to bring himself back to the place of connection that he was before the Aveda. To wash and cleanse one's soul from the dirty garments that have become soiled and dirty from the Avedas. That's Tshuva Tata. And Tshuva Ilah, what's the higher level of Tshuva? Was kommt noch Tshuva Tata, which only comes after a person has completed Tshuva Tata well. Is the Hashavas HaNefesh, this is returning one's soul not to a condition before it sinned, rather l'mekaira chulu, returning the soul to its condition the way it is in its source before it came into this world. Been unified there with Hashem, betachlis hayichud, with the absolute unity, beterem shenavcha, beruach pivis barach, before the breath is blown out of the source of Hashem, leidet lamata l'slavish beguf adam, and then it descends below and is placed into the body of a person. So Tshuva Ilah means when a person brings himself to such a deep level of connection to Hashem, which is equivalent to the level of connection that the neshama has when it's still in the source, when it's not even an entity for itself at all. So we understand this is two completely different levels of Tshuva. Isn't it move on? If so, it's not understood. Wie kann man sagen, Kanal Reish Sif Aleph? How could you say that, as was mentioned before in the beginning of the Sikha, and Sif Aleph, as the inyan of Gemara Kaparo Mirka Nefesh, those aspects of Tshuva, that what do they accomplish? They complete the atonement, they fully cleanse the soul, that one should be completely accepted by Hashem as before he sinned. The Alter Rebbe explains, even after one does Tshuva, but nevertheless, the fasting is to bring an additional appeasement, that he should be fully accepted as before he sins. So on that, the Alter Rebbe says, Zenen Achad Tshuva. Those fasts, all of that, Perik Beis, Perik Gimel, that comes after the Tshuva. That's not included in it doesn't add to the actual mitzvah of Tshuva itself. On the other hand, though, but to explain the subject of Tshuva Ilah, the higher level of Tshuva, returning one's soul to a condition the way it was before it came into the world. An inyan was this is something that applies. This is a level of Tshuva that applies to someone that never sinned in his life. The very fact that he's here, a soul in a body in this world, there is a concept of Tshuva to return its connection, to bring a connection to the neshama here like it is above. Seemingly this is totally not relevant to correcting the effect of the sin of the person. This is a different level of tshuva altogether, even for a tzaddik. But regarding this, we say, is yenegeh it's a mitzvah tshuva, This is relevant to the mitzvah of tshuva. Not only is it relevant on some level, some layer, some dimension of the tshuva, but it's the basic, the beginning, and the main inyan of tshuva. To really understand what tshuva is right at the beginning. So tshuva ilah, the highest level of tshuva, is relevant for this. How could that be? Why is this so? So here, from Sif Dalet going forward in the Sikha, from Sif Dalet through Sif Zayin, the Rebbe will give us a lengthy and elaborate explanation of these 4 levels of tshuva in order to appreciate what each level is and then to understand why they're really all connected to each other and so on. So let's begin. So to explain all of this, let's first preface what it says in other places, and a lot of this sikha here is based on a famous maimer of Matovu in Likutei Torah, where the Alter Rebbe discusses these levels of tshuva. As tshuva tato, so there it explains that tshuva tato is verbunden mit der Avodah von sur mira va'asei tov, that when it comes to the basic level of tshuva, the lower level of tshuva, this is connected to the pasuk where it says sur meira and asei tov, which is just simply translated, stay away from what's negative, what's bad, and do good, which is kiyama mitzvahs. That includes basically fulfilling all mitzvahs. But as we'll see soon, the Rebbe will explain both the sur meira and the asei tov as it is in the avodah of tshuva on a completely different level. We're not just talking about the simple sur meira and asei tov where a person does mitzvahs and doesn't do an avodah. Und tshuva ilah, and then the Alter Rebbe explains there that what is the avodah of tshuva ilah mit eisek hatayra. Tshuva ilah is expressed in one's learning, in how he learns. And that will also be expressed. We're not just talking here about a simple level of learning Torah, but we're talking about a tshuva that's expressed in a very unique and deep level of learning Torah. Und wir bringt euch weiter in Igeres Tshuva von Rai Mehem Parshas Nasai. This idea that tshuva ilah is related to learning Torah is quoted later in Tanya from Zoya. As tshuva ilah is the yisasik ba'orai sechulu, when one occupies himself in learning Torah. So this is the basic point that it says here. We're talking about kiyama mitzvahs. And in Kiyama Mitzvahs, there are 2 levels of Sumira and Asei Tov, and then Tshuva ilah is related to Torah. And as we'll see later in the Sikha, the Rebbe will also explain the higher level of Tshuva ilah, and that's something as we'll see. Now, the Yeshloimar Eine from the Biyurim in that. So to explain what this means, why are the 2 levels of Tshuva Tata related to Sumira and Asei Tov, and the Tshuva ilah related to Torah? In the Avodah von Kiyama mitzvahs. So to begin with tshuva tata, when a yid fulfills mitzvahs, drikt zechais der bittul von Kabbalah Somach Hashemayim. What does it really express? It's not just an action. What it expresses is that one is accepting the yoke of heaven and he's fulfilling Hashem's will. As it is great zu folgen als was der Eibishter heißt. It's expressing the readiness to fulfill whatever Hashem commands. Afille, wenn das ist verbunden mit Schwierigkeiten. And that in the key over here is that the person will do it and he's committed to fulfill the mitzvahs even when there are difficulties. Azevi and Evet, just like a slave, a servant, was folgt aus dem Zivya Aden, he fulfills and follows the master's command, nit rechnen sich mit keine Cheshbonos. He doesn't pay attention to any calculations he may have. I'm interested, I'm in the mood, I'm not. He's dedicated. This is who he is. He's an Evet, so he does what his master wants from him. That's what the idea of a mitzvah generally is about. There's the person, and he accepts upon himself the yoke of heaven to follow and fulfill whatever Hashem wants. On the other hand, when a person learns Torah, and we're talking over here about a person that learns Torah on a high level, as we'll see. So the level of bittul that there is, when a person becomes nullified to Hashem in the Torah that he learns, is, what does this bittul consist of? It's not that there's a person that's doing or following a master. What's happening here is, as the Dvar Havaya Zu Halacha, the words of Hashem, the halacha of the Torah, he amedaberes mitoich greinai. This is what's coming out of his mouth when he speaks words of Torah. He speaks the halacha of Torah. So what is this? This is not anything of his. This is the Eibishter's will, the Eibishter's halacha that he's speaking and saying. He's not doing something that Hashem wants from him. There's Hashem, and Hashem commands him, and he fulfills, like a Eved. So there's 2 entities here. There's the master, and then there's the slave that fulfills what the master wants from him. The person, here we're talking, as you see, we're talking about a person that learns Torah, that's not learning and using his approach to Torah is not that I learn and try to figure out and understand, and does it make sense to me, does it not make sense to me? We're talking over here about a person where his mind is open to receive Hashem's Torah and to communicate, to give out, and to speak the words of Hashem, like a complete open funnel. Hashem is coming and speaking through him. That's what Torah is. Not fulfilling anything, but rather Hashem is just expressed in him. Thus, the far is, therefore, the Gemara tells us, is Man Malki Rabbanon. Who are true kings? The Rabbanon, the ones that learn Torah. So a king, meaning the Eibishter, the king, so is revealed and expressed in the Talmud Chacham when he learns Torah, in this sense. When one learns Torah with this bittul, is a nit ke'eved hamekayim mitzvah melech. So he's not a slave, which is an entity for himself, and he is totally bottled and fulfilling what his master wants. Nor zay mitzias gufa is their melech. The melech himself is revealed in him, and speaking the words of Allah of the Eibishter is coming out of his mouth. He's not doing anything for Hashem. Adarabah, the words of Hashem, he's speaking what Hashem's will is. He's saying over the words of Hashem is coming out from his mouth. That is the general difference between doing a mitzvah and learning Torah. On this level here, we're talking about a high level of learning Torah and fulfilling mitzvah with an absolute bittul. Yeshleimar, so now with this we can understand, as the bittul basic at Torah, nimmt sich von dem Sheirish an Neshama, wie sie is given betarem shenafcha chulo. This level of learning Torah with this kind of bittul, what's the source of this bittul? How does Yid have the power for this level of bittul where it's not even him at all? It's not him doing or him following, but it's just the words of the Eibishter that's coming out of his mouth. This comes from the source of the neshama of a Yid, the way it was beterem shenafcha, before it was blown, before it came out of its source. So the neshama of a Yid is rooted within Hashem himself, where there is no separate entity, it's one with Hashem. Based on the level of the neshama of Yid, once it descends below, is v'yazakt in Tanya. So here, the Alter Rebbe in Tanya says, is nishmas adam, the neshama of a Yid, afilu tzadik gam cholo, even an absolute tzadik. Eina betel b'mitzias legamri cholo. The neshama is not completely bottled. Liyais la'chodim u'miyichodim b'yichud gamri cholo, to be completely unified with Hashem with a perfect unity. Once the neshama leaves its source, so there's various levels of a development of the neshama. He has a personality, he has a feeling, and so on. There's a mitzias of a neshama, and his feelings, great feelings of love for Hashem, it's a mitzias of a neshama that loves. Aber the bittul v'yichud hana, was is da basic Torah, the bittul mentioned before when it comes to a person that learns Torah and it's simply Hashem's words that are speaking out of his mouth. Kommt durch dem, was is meyer, the beginning of neshama, wie es betarem shenafcha. When the source of the neshama can be expressed, when a person is able to access and connect to that level of his neshama, which is one with Hashem before it leaves its source. There, that level of neshama is completely one with Hashem. So the expression of that complete unity with Hashem, where it's one entity, is when a person learns Torah with this bittul, where it's the words of Hashem that's in him. It's the melech that's speaking in him. So it's not two entities that are connecting or unifying, but it's one, it's Hashem himself. So now we understand why, generally speaking, the lower level of tshuva is expressed by a person dedicating himself strongly and deeply in the fulfillment of mitzvahs. And tshuva is expressed by the fact that there's a deeper dedication and tshuva in his learning of Torah. The bittul von Yid mitzad the neshama vizis noch der vayipach, the bittul of a Yid Hashem, which is based on the level of the neshama after it was blown, after it comes out of its source. And not only it leaves its source, but it actually descends here below. It comes into this world and is enclosed in a body. Is bloizen and neifen via mitzias state in a bittul zum Eibishter. There's an entity here. That's the basis. And this entity is dedicating, nullifying himself to Hashem. Ki bittul eved lemelech v'chayetze b'zeh, as the bittul of a servant to a king. On ayes, as in yonof and shuvat tata. So since the whole purpose and point of shuvat tata is beikke der umkehr von ayiden zu sein friede gemeime der matze wie es gewen lifnei achet. This level of tshuva is where a person is returning to where he was in his connection to Hashem before he sinned. As the expression quoted before, to cleanse, to wash away the soiled garments from the averis he did. The Seich Dan is a Gevena Metzias canal. Even then, we're speaking about the Neshama here below, which is an entity for itself. The Riber is Tshuva Tato Shaykh Beker Tzukima Mitzvahs. So where is this level of Tshuva expressed in? In the rededication, in fulfilling mitzvahs. Because the bittul by Kiyama Mitzvahs is Ke'eved HaMekayim Mitzvahs HaMelech. The ultimate fulfillment of a mitzvah is when it's done with the absolute Kabbalah style, the acceptance and following to do every and any mitzvah of Hashem, like a servant that serves a master. So it's a very deep bittul, but nevertheless, what defines this bittul is that there's two entities, the Eved, the slave, that's mevatel himself to the king. By contrast, when it comes to Tshuvi Law, the sinyone is to umkeren, the nishamet, to irmaker, this tshuva consists of a person reconnecting and unifying himself to Hashem the way the neshama was above before it even left its source. The Riber is die Darge von Tshuva verbunden mit Eise Katera. So this level of Tshuva is connected and is expressed by the person's level of learning. Where when a person is learning Torah, he's not following someone else, but he's just allowing, he's open and allowing the Eibish's Chochmah to be in his head and come out of his mouth. It's not the person himself, it's just the Eibush that's in him and being expressed in him. That's the level, that's the general explanation for the difference between Tshuva Tata and Tshuva Ilah, as it relates to mitzvahs and learning Torah. But now here, the Rebbe will continue in Sifhei to explain now what are the two levels. We divide now Tshuva Tata itself into two levels. There's the Tshuva Tata and the Baal Tshuva Tata. The two levels explained there. Tshuva Tata und Tshuva Ilah sind euch voran in jeder eine von die zwei Tshuvas. So you can find these two levels in the two levels of Tshuva, which means in Tshuva Tata, there's the Tshuva Tata aspect of Tshuva Tata, which is the very basic level, the beginning of Tshuva. And then there's the Tshuva Ilah aspect, a higher level of Tshuva within Tshuva Tata. Und das sind die zwei Tages von Tshuva und Baal Tshuva. The expression of Tshuva, one returns, and Baal Tshuva, he's the source of this returning, a higher level of returning, a deeper level of returning. So you have this both in Tshuva Tata and in Tshuva Ilah. So what is the explanation of these two levels? So here the Rabbi begins first with Tshuva Tata. So Tshuva Tata relates to the mitzvahs, but mitzvahs itself could be divided in two, as mentioned before, Sur Meirah and Aseh Tov, which is going to be the two levels of Tshuva Tata. The explanation here is as follows. Regarding these two levels in Tshuva Tata, so it's explained in Chassidus, and again this is here in the Maimer and Lekutei Torah, Parshas Balak. As the niedrige Darge von Tshuva Tata, the Tshuva Gufe, the lower level, the more basic level of Tshuva Tata, this is the Tshuva itself, is verbunden mit der Avodah von Sur Meirah. That's connected to Sur Meirah. As the Rebbe will explain, Sur Meirah again literally means to stay away from what's negative, which means now as follows: to peilen bei sich, as soll nicht sein, as soll nicht sein shaykh zu tun azach, was es hepech ratzon Hashem. The Sur Meirah we're talking about over here is not an individual that he could sin. The temptation of a sin is something which is real, and it could happen, and chas v'shalom he would fall through. But Tshuva is where there's this very strong resolution, and a person brings himself to the point that it's out of the question. It's impossible for him to do an Aveda. To rebel against Hashem, it's a level of Tshuva where it's going to be completely not shaykh for him to do an Aveda, to do opposite of Hashem's will. That is the first and basic level of Tshuva Tata, which is what Sur Meirah means, that Ra, an Aveda, rebellion against Hashem, it's Sur, he runs away from that like fire. Und die hechere Darge von Tshuva Tata, die beginnen von Baal Tshuva, now the higher level of Tshuva Tata, which is called the Baal Tshuva, is verbunden mit der Avodah von Aseh Tov. This is already something deeper. This is expressed in the words Aseh Tov, when one is focused on doing good, and the words doing good over here means as follows: Liyageya as atzmai b'teiro tefillah. When one toils and works very hard in his involvement in learning and davening, that's the main point here. He does it more than his nature, more than his habit. This is what the Alter Rebbe describes earlier in Tanya as one that is serving Hashem, which means he goes beyond his habit 101 times. In those times, in those times, the habit was to review 100 times, and he goes one step beyond that. That's the idea of tshuva, the higher level of tshuva tata. So not just that something that's against the will of Hashem is out of the question. A person runs away from that like fire, but his involvement in the positive, in doing the will of Hashem, is with such an enthusiasm, with such a connection, that he's ready to go and break his nature, to go beyond his regular nature. That's how far it goes. Und damit is move on, wie die zwei Beginnes, Tshuva and Baal Tshuva. With this we can understand why these two levels of the Tshuva and the Baal Tshuva, was in Tshuva Tata, which are the two levels within Tshuva Tata, then in the end, the Darga from Tshuva Tata and Tshuva Ilah. They are somewhat similar to the general division of the two levels of Tshuva, Tshuva Tata and Tshuva Ilah. And here the Rebbe will give us a deeper definition of the difference between these two levels within the Tshuva Tata. In the Raveda from Surmera, when it comes to the first and basic level of Tshuva, where the person is running away from anything that's opposite of Hashem's will, Fablait, the Ovid, in Zayim Metzias, this is a person that's remaining within the limitations of who he is. He's not going anything beyond himself. The focus of this Tshuva here is not to go against his nature, to go out of his nature in any way. He's just his very strong resolution, a very strong Kabbalah style that an Aveda to rebel against Hashem is out of the question. But it's all relating within his nature of who he is. It says, Nar was der Oil Malchus Shamayim v'sanemt of sich. This yoke of heaven that he's accepting now upon himself, halt him up from the Oivezain of Ratzon. This holds him back from transgressing on the will of Hashem. The Riber, okay, so therefore, the Riber is the Shaykh to Tshuva Tata, Shebet Tata Gufa. So therefore, this is the lowest, the basic level of Tshuva Tata, because it's all the person doing Tshuva with his Metzias, based on his Metzias. Yes, thinking very deeply and bringing himself to a very strong resolution. And Aved is going to be out of the question altogether, but nevertheless, all within the Metzias of who he is. So that's the concept of Tshuva Tata. Tshuva Tata again relates to a person being an entity here in this world. But when it comes to the higher level here, where the person is focusing on a Seif Taiv, which means when he's toiling and is learning, more than his habit, he's even breaking his nature. So here the person is stepping out and going above and beyond to some degree of his entity of who he is. The Rebbe is the Shaykh to Tshuva Ilah. So therefore, within the Tshuva Tata itself, this is an expression of Tshuva Ilah. Again, the point of Tshuva Ilah is where a person is not just serving the Eibishter based on his entity, but there's a connection to Hashem which is beyond who he is here in this world. It's when the Neshama is connected to Hashem above, before the person is a Metzias. When you go beyond your nature, there's an expression of that level of your Neshama. However, this is not yet the real concept of Tshuva Ilah at all. Afal Pikein yet, at the same time, even this higher level of a person going above and beyond his nature is not a darge in Tshuva Tata. This is within Tshuva Tata itself. This is the deeper level of Tshuva Tata. The person is working with his Metzias, but here he's ready to go beyond his nature. So within this framework of his Metzias, this is referred to as Tshuva Ilah. Says Novus in Tshuva Tata Gufa is as beginnes Tshuva Ilah Shaba. Here within this framework of his Metzias, this is the aspect of Tshuva Ilah. But in essence, though, this is not Tshuva Ilah. And the Rebbe gives two reasons for this. Weil, Aleph number one, Eich in der Avede from Vaseitoi is a Nachnet Areis Legamri from Teva Mitziyusay. Even here in this Avede Vaseitoi, where a person pushes himself beyond his nature, he has not left his nature of what his entity is. So Novus Lepayol starkte sich auf sein Teva durch Milchama. This is a person that is pushing and fighting, is a ovid. He's pushing to go beyond his nature with a battle. But in essence, what is the identity of the person? How does he see himself? I have my nature and I have what's beyond my nature. He's ready to go beyond his nature, but his Aveda is based on the fact that there's a nature. The very fact that he feels that he's pushing himself beyond his nature means that the premise of his Aveda begins with the fact that he's a Metzias. And Beis Nachmer, even more so, even this that he changes and goes beyond his nature and his habit, is the pull from the madam. We're talking over here about an action that the person is doing. The very fact that this is something. This is the action of a person, like it was said before regarding the Eved that does and follows and serves his master. So there's two entities here. The basis of this whole Aveda is that there's Hashem and there's me and there's what I do for Hashem. I do very, very extreme and very beyond his nature, but still there's a pu'ula of the person. Nit by Eisek HaTorah, unlike Eisek HaTorah, which is not about what you do. Rather, was Dvar Havaya is Medaberes Mitech Groin. Over there, it's just the Eibishter's words which are present in you, which you're open and you're a keli for the Hashem that's just in you and being expressed through you, and you're not doing anything. That's the real Tshuva. As we'll see, the Rebbe will explain here at length now. In Sivav, the Rebbe will go on to explain what Tshuva is all about, and then really to explain what the Baal Tshuva is, the deepest level of Tshuva, which is even beyond this bittul that there is when a person learns Torah. Okay, so the Aveda of the bittul of learning Torah was already explained before. That the person's not doing anything, rather he's just opening himself up and allowing Hashem to be present within him, the words of Hashem to come out of him, totally bottled to Hashem, totally unified with Hashem like the Neshama was before it came into the world. That was the Tshuva. Here, the Rebbe will take us now to the next level, the Baal Tshuva. Even this level of learning Torah, which is connected to the level of Tshuva, as explained, is the snor di dage from Tshuva gufe shebe Tshuva. This is the first level of Tshuva that's in Tshuva. And the dage from Baal Tshuva, the level of the Baal Tshuva, or the source and the higher level of Tshuva, is the Aveda fun kadesh atzmacha b'mutelach. When a person brings his tshuva to the place of things that are permissible, his own personal private life, and he brings the sanctity of Hashem there, that aspect of his life is dedicated to Hashem, that actually expresses a deeper level of tshuva than the mitzvahs, whether it's sur mirah, whether it's aseh tov, and even the learning of Torah. This expresses the ultimate level of tshuva. And this will be explained over here at length. As tshuva Baal tshuva. That, as we explained before regarding tshuva tata, that the two levels of tshuva, then bedugmet to tshuva tata and tshuva ilah. So when we divided tshuva tata in two categories, so the Rebbe said that really those two categories can be compared to the general division of tshuva tata and tshuva ilah. Kumtais. So it comes out, we could say the same here as well. As in tshuva ilah gufe is eisek atayre b'chinas tshuva tata shaba. The tshuva ilah, which is expressed by the level of learning that we spoke about, that's the tshuva tata of this tshuva. And kadesh atzmacha b'mutelach is b'chinas tshuva ilah shabbat. When a person sanctifies those things that are permissible in his life, you bring the tshuva into that level of or that place in your life. That is the real level of tshuva ilah. So what's the explanation for this? Why is the kadesh atzmacha b'mutelach such a deep dedication to Hashem, even more than when you're just totally open to Hashem being present in you with the Torah that's in you, and it's just Hashem's words that are coming out from you? So the explanation for this is as follows. The Mechilte sagt auf dem Pasuk, V'yisam lizgula gaimer. So in the Mechilte it says in the Pasuk, V'yisam lizgula, which is what Hashem says before Matan Torah to Yidden will be a zgula for Hashem. So but the Mechilte focuses on the words V'yisam li. Sorry. V'yisemli means shetiu knuyimli, you will be acquired by me. V'oiskim b'Torah, and you will occupy your time with Torah. V'loi tiyu oiskim b'dvarim acherim, and you will not be busy with other things. So it's not just also, it may sound like all the Mechilte is saying is one point, that you'll be learning Torah. But it says more here, as the Rebbe points out. What this means is, as oiskim b'Torah alein is noch nit genug, that the Mechilte here is not simply speaking about one that occupies his time with learning. That's not sufficient to reach, to come to the ultimate level that I'm acquired to Hashem. I belong completely to Hashem. That's not accomplished just through the learning of Torah. Nor es fordert sich euch der Tnai von loi tiu oiskem bedvarim acherim. As Mechilte adds, and he's not occupied with other matters. Das is the Aveda from Kadesh Atzmacha b'Mutelach. What is this other matters that this refers to? What it means is, there are other things that a person does in his life, but it's not for himself. The Kedusha of the Eibishter is present in the Dvarim Acherim as well. That's when you're totally one and acquired to Hashem. Why is this so? Das was is Eisik b'Torah The fact that a person learns Torah, even when the learning of Torah is on a level where he's completely open to Hashem, and it's just the words of Hashem that are in him, are present in him and coming out of his mouth, is nachnit kenechoche. It's still not proof to the fact as that is b'chol mitziyusei koni zu Meibishten, that his entire entity is completely acquired to Hashem. Why not? Varim es ken sein, because it could be as ein bittul in Eisek HaTorah. What is this nullification that he has when he learns? Is mitzadem was the Torah nemtem durach azai as a falitza negen mitzias. That what's happening over here, the Torah which is entering into him is so holy and so powerful, so the Torah overwhelms him and sort of shuts him down, and it's just the Eibusha that's present in him. So it's really the Torah that's overwhelming him. However, this doesn't yet mean as mitzad atzmai shteiten a bittel b'metzias tzelakus. However, this does not mean that this really penetrated the person himself, that he, for who he is fully dedicated to the Eibishter. There is that bittul in him because the Torah comes into him. But who is he? The person himself, the entire metzias of the person as he is that fully acquired to Hashem? Not necessarily. By contrast, when it comes to the fact that a person sanctifies every aspect of his life, even those permissible things that it's all belonging to Hashem, as is sich mekadish peirish seine eigene inyanim dvarim acherim. Chod is mutalach. Here, when the person sanctifies himself and is separating himself from his own personal things, those things that are permissible and private for himself, and he doesn't, I have nothing, it's not mine at all. Chod is mutalach, even though these are things that are totally allowed. So here it's the person himself. He's making this choice to take that aspect where it is me. Not this is myself here. And it's here that he connects to Hashem. What this expresses is as that is mevatel or mesalek as atzmeli bot le'elav yisbarach. That he's completely nullifying himself. He's putting himself aside totally, nullifying himself to Hashem. There is nothing to him. He has nothing for himself. And mitzias is konoi li. It's completely quiet to meet Hashem. That's a deeper expression of bittul, even more than the Torah that is coming into a person. When the Torah comes into a person, true, what happens is it's the Eibusha that's present in you. You're not doing anything as an evet to connect to Hashem. But still, the point there is, there's you and there's the Torah. You have to nullify yourself completely. It's not you. You're a keli to the Torah which is in you. The Torah has tremendous kedusha, and when this holiness of words of Torah come into you, so who am I? A person has no significance when the holiness of Torah is in him. So therefore, he's like sort of shuts down, and it's just the Torah that's coming out of him. That's what's happening when a person learns. Kadesh Hatzchal b'mutalach is when the person is engaged in his own personal activity. So here it's me. Myself, who am I? What is the mitzias of the person? It's not Torah and me. Who am I? Here, when the person does it for the Eibush to say completely, that's an expression of that the person is completely penetrated with the Eibush. There's nothing left of him that's himself. He was misalik himself completely. It's just Hashem. With this we understand, was a mitis von Shuvi the real, genuine concept of Tshuvi law, to be totally the whole mitzias of the person, here below in this world, should be completely batel to Hashem, like the neshama was above, where it's not a mitzias at all. So that is expressed specifically in the Aveda of Tshuvi, in the Aveda of that is, in the Aveda from Kadesh Atzmacha b'mutalach. Dafke here, when every aspect of the person's life, those permissible things are sanctified for Hashem. Masha'enkin, the bittul from Eisek HaTorah, by contrast, when a person is nullified to Hashem and is learning, is bechinas Tshuva Tato Shebet Tshuvi law. This is a lower level of Tshuvi law. And the Rabbi explains again here. That inyan from Tshuvi law is, again, what's the theme? What's the point of Tshuvi law? L'dofka b'yizbarach b'yichud nifla. To cleave to Hashem and to be one with Hashem with a wondrous unity. To be with the absolute union where it's not a union of two, but it's one, before the neshama came out of its source. Over there, it's impossible to say that there's an entity of a neshama and it's going to connect, they'll unify. It's just all one. Und yes, as the bittel von Eisaka Teire is nit shel gamri sein eigene Metzias kanal. Since when a person learns Teire, it doesn't totally negate his Metzias. There is the Teire that's in you, but then there's the person's own personal private life, which is a layer in the person where there is a self. The Teire overwhelms the person. So at that time when the Teire is in him, the person doesn't feel himself at all. But soft the Metzias of the person of who he is, there's the Teire in me. That's if it doesn't express itself in the areas of Muttalach, in the person's own private self. So therefore, the Rebbe is as B'chinas Tshuva Tata should be Tshuva. This is just still the lower aspect of Tshuva within Tshuva. There's still a Metzias of the person here. Schenken der Weide von Kadesh Atzmacha b'Muttalach, was sie bringt heraus, wie sein ganze Metzias ist Koni zum Eibischen. When a person is sanctifying his own personal life to Hashem. So here, what this expresses is that every fiber of his being is completely owned by Hashem. Is das die hechere Darge von Amitis Ein von Tshuva. This is the highest level, and this is the real concept of Tshuva, and a person is fully and totally dedicated to Hashem. Okay, so now we have a very clear and elaborate explanation of the 4 levels of Tshuva. Now here, the Rebbe will explain the deepest level of Tshuva. Now this is relevant for the question that Rebbe asked in the beginning of the Sikha when it came to the explanation of the levels of Tshuva that are hinted in the words Levayr Heter Bar Chavas Abir. So the Alter Rebbe, according to what the Rebbe's father says, hints to 3 of these levels of Tshuva, but the highest level of Tshuva does not hint to. So here the Rebbe will explain to us better to have an understanding what the highest level of Tshuva is hinted in the Yud of Hashem's holy name. With the explanation said here, we can now understand what the Avodah from Kadesh Atzmacha b'Muttalach is verbunden mit Chochma shebenefesh. This level of Tshuva connects to the Chochma in the person's neshama. B'chinas Yud Nekuda. It's that Yud which is the letter of the Aleph Beis, which is 1 point. Kanal Sifalav as Baal Tshuva Lo as B'chinas Yud. The Baal Tshuva, the highest level, is the Yud. Weil, so the explanation here is because durch der Avodah wird gebracht die Etzem Nekudas als Kashus von Ayiden mit dem Eibischen. It's this Avodah of Tshuva that expresses the very deepest point of a Yid's connection to Hashem, versus a Yud, which is the letter Yud, and a Kuda. Yud is just 1 point, Hecha von Seir. There's no formulation to this. There's no description to this. There's no details to this. It doesn't relate to any specific level. It's just the point itself. This is the very connection itself, not defined in any way. And the Rebbe explains, the connection of Yid to Hashem on the other 3 levels of Tshuva. Sur Meira, explained before, Asay Tov, and then the Umbittel, the Eisaka Teire, the Tshuva in the person's learning Teire, kommt in a gewissen Zier. This is already the level of connection in Tshuva V'yid that already comes to with a certain description. It relates to a certain aspect of the person and so on. Since this is a level of a person connecting where he hasn't totally left who he is, the Aveda besteht zum Mekashe sein, sein Metzias mit Eibischen. In all these 3, the common denominator is that the basis here of this Aveda is that there is the entity of the person, and he, with his entity, will connect to Hashem on various degrees. Whether the full dedication that an Aveda should be out of the question, whether the full dedication to even go beyond his nature or habit, or even more so, that he's open to Torah, and that when the Torah is in him, it's just the words of Hashem in him, but it's all the basis here is that there is an entity of a person. The Far is that Oifen als Kashrus mit Zuyer leuten Zier von die Keuches Adam mit und in welche tut auf die Kashrus. So therefore this level of connection will be defined by and connected to the specific level of where that Tshuva connects to. What aspect of the soul of the person is coming out in this, is being expressed in this. Und der Rebbe sind die 3 Sugi Avedas verbunden mit die 3 Eisies, Hey, Vav, Hey, von Shem Havaya. So these 3 Avedas are connected to these 3 letters. V'zenem b'pchinas Zier. As the shape of these letters indicate, it has a certain shape, a certain size, whether the width, whether the length. Mashenkein, the Aveda from Kadesh Atzmacha b'Muttalach. But when it comes to the deepest level of Tshuva, which is expressed by the fact that the person is fully included, even his personal things as well. Was in Yonah is, the point in this Tshuva is, Shemevatel u'misalak es atzmai ritzonai. He lets go of himself totally. Und sie bringt daraus die Etzem, Nekudes als Kashrus, was ist Hecher von dem Geder Vetzir von der Koiches Adam. And this expresses a tshuva which is above and beyond the description of one koich or another. Whether it's a holy thing the person is doing, whether it's a simple mundane act, in any way, in every aspect of him, every fiber of his being is connected to Hashem. Why everything? Because it's not defined by any of the specific koiches. So it includes everything. So this is hinted in the Yud, the point of tshuva, the depth of tshuva, which is just the connection itself, the oneness with Hashem, which is beyond description, and therefore it penetrates everything. Okay, so we have the explanation here of the deepest level of tshuva. It's not just another level of tshuva. This is the point of tshuva. This is the essence of the tshuva. So now we come from here to understand the relation of these levels of tshuva to one another. We've explained how each one is a distinct level of tshuva, and then there's the highest level, which is the point of the tshuva, the source of the tshuva, the nekuda. But here, really, they all are connected to each other, as the Rabbi will explain here in Sivches. Kishem v'didalda isis v'shem avaya hoib tzachon mit the nekuda von ois yud. Just like it is with Hashem's name, Yud Kei Vav Kei. So the name begins with the letter Yud, und die Nekude wird noch nimshach in the Tzir von Hei Rishayna. And then that Yud continues to the next letter. So it's all letters of one name. Or maybe even when you write the letter Hey, you begin writing that point of the Yud, and then when you continue expanding the letter, it becomes a Hey. Und dann auch in the Tzir von Vav, and then you have the next letter of the Vav, bis in the Tzir von Hei Achrayna, including also the second Hey, which is on a lower level, but it's all one continuation, it's part of one name. So the same could be said regarding these four different levels of tshuva. It's four distinct levels, but it's really one flow. It's one. There's a connection here. As is nit in ganzen besondere inyonim be'etzem uhusam. They are not really, in their essence, distinct and separated levels from one another. Nor is there an ein hemshech. There's really a flow here. There's a connection between one level and the other. And the connection is as follows. Is the nekudas haskashas von ayidin mit neibischen was es hecher von zir. All of these levels, it all begins with the point. The point in the beginning is the point of connection, the depth of the connection of a yid, which has no specific description, which doesn't pertain to one level or another. That point is that there is no element of the entity of the person that's relevant here. And therefore that's expressed where the person fully drops his entity, and therefore even in his private, everything is just belongs to Hashem. Now, it's this point now that's being expressed in the world of levels when you are dealing with the entity of the person. So that nekuda is expressed in various different ways. We're not stepping away from the nekuda. We're not dropping the point. The source of all these levels is the point of the tshuva, the point of the yid being completely one. Now you have how that nekuda is expressed on every level specifically. In Esekatayre, the first level of tshuva law, following the source of the tshuva, is learning the Torah, and the deep level of bittul, as described, Vasei Tov, then Dasei Tov, going beyond one's nature, Biz in Sur Mirah, and then to the lowest level of tshuva, which is Sur Mirah, even though this is the lowest of the levels, where the person is completely within his limits, but he's just with a very strong resolution. What's really the depth? And this is an expression of the nekuda of tshuva on this level in the mitzias of the person. On the far, so therefore what comes out from this is as follows. Be'eis es felt der bittul von Kabbalah Zomach HaShamayim in der Aveda von Sur Mirah. When one is lacking the proper and full acceptance of the yoke of heaven just for the simple and basic Sur Mirah, that an Aveda should be out of the question. So really, what is this effect in his connection to Hashem? It doesn't just connect that level of connection, that basic level of his behavior here on this level. So this doesn't just shake or blemish his connection to Hashem, which is hinted in the Heitata, which is the Malchus, referring to the action and behavior of the person, that his behavior is not so resolute. This touches and there's an effect here on the previous levels, on the higher levels as well. Varom, because even the lowest level stems from the nekuda, from the levels above. Warum wenn bei ihm wird mehr gewähnt, die Nekuda ist a bit latzma Yud. Because if the Nekuda, which is the source of all levels of Tshuva, the Nekuda of the Yud, that essential connection would be there, would be shining by the person, oder al kapanim wie sie steht in der Zier von Esek HaTorah. Or if that level of tshuva would be expressed, not even regarding the lower levels, but it would be expressed at least in the way he learns, on in Vasei Tov, or at least on the level of Vasei Tov, Heiri Shaino and Vav, Volt B'yem Given, a bittul from Kabbalah Sal. So then that would flow down also to his actual behavior, that his behavior would come along to be completely batal to Hashem. The disconnect, what's the source of this disconnect here? If the person can't bring himself to the proper full resolution in his behavior, which relates to the lowest, to the Hey Tata, the source of that is the disconnect really begins because the Hey now is being disconnected to the higher levels. If the Nekuda would be clear and strong, so then that Nekuda would be expressed in the behavior as well. But das ist the time von dem, was beis a Yid fällt durch an achet. So this is also the reason for this, that if a Yid is stumbling and doing an Aveda, dafür ankommen euch zu Tshuvilah. So the Tshuvilah is something which is needed not just for after a person completes Tshuva, not to return his neshama back to the way it was before it came into this world, but Tshuvilah actually completes the source of the cause of what caused this Aveda. Because, as I said, the Rabbi is saying the disconnect begins that the Nekuda is not connecting to his behavior, to his Tshuva Tata. If the Nekuda is clear, is shining, so then his resolution in his behavior, that an Aveda should be out of question, would be very, very strong, like the strength of the Nekuda. Was darf gedan is ein tshuva shlema, and then even the basic tshuva, the basic resolution, will be complete and full without any won't shake. It won't be any doubts to this. So the expression of tshuva shlema, a complete tshuva, that tshuva law is not just a different level of tshuva after you're done with tshuva tata. Tshuva shlema means that tshuva law completes the basic level of tshuva, the tshuva tata. The Rebbe takes us here to another level here in Siftes, the connection and the influence of the deeper tshuva of Tshuva and Tshuva Tata. Nochme, furthermore, it's not only that sleep shleimus at tshuva dav zayin euch di avodah von Tshuva, that in order to have a complete tshuva on the basic level of tshuva, so you must have the influence and the connection to correct the source of the disconnect of that which is accomplished with Tshuva. Was kommt nach Tshuva Tata, which follows after Tshuva Tata. So you could have, the basic level of Tshuva Tata. According to what we're saying till now, you have the basic level of Tshuva Tata, where a person accepts upon himself not to do an Aved anymore with a strong resolution. But if you want that resolution to have the real taikif, so then comes another level of Tshuva, which corrects the source of this Aveda that you did, and there, this will give an even added strength to your resolution. But it's even more than this. The very beginning, when a person is doing the Tshuva Tata itself, darf sein in azah oifen, as in soll sein nirgash, benegei lepoil al kaponim, die tnue von Tshuva. Even when the person is still at the level of Tshuva Tata, so even though he can't yet experience that level of connection of Tshuva, but as far as the actual resolution that is concerned, it has to have some connection. It has to have some feeling of that this is not just about my behavior. This is about my neshama. This is about the nekuda. This is about something very deep and essential. So even though he's not yet on the level to live and really feel that essential connection, but the strength of the basic resolution in Tshuva Tata does have to have an influence, knowing that this is based on the neshama in me, the nekuda in me, and therefore that gives him that extra encouragement, that extra taikif, even in the Tshuva Tata itself, as it is in its place. So this says, in other words, what this means is as follows. As ein Kabbalah ala bala bal yoshevoid lekisla. The simple acceptance, the first and beginning, the basic level of Tshuva Tata, to accept upon himself not to return to the foolishness, limrid b'malchusi yisbarach, to rebel against Hashem, and not to transgress and go against Hashem's will. This should be in such a way, to such an extent, as in Izo sein nirgash nitnor the bittul from Kabbalah Sel Malchus Shemayim. What the person feels is not just that he nullifies himself to fulfill Hashem's will and to accept the yoke of heaven. Wie an Eved, was is great to oisfolge dem Zivi Odin, like a slave that's ready to fulfill his master's will, afal pi azay mitzias is nitter Odin, and that's a level of bittul where there's me, there's the slave, and there's the master. It's two separate entities. Nor as der bittul is a mesuviv und a titza, von dem was is mitzad seine Neshama besharsha is miyuchad mit neibischen betachlis ha-yichad. He realizes, true, I may be now here on this level where I'm just the Eved, the slave that's mevatel myself to Hashem. But where does that level of an Eved come from? It really is a result of the fact that I'm in essence one with Hashem. So therefore that just adds an extra oomph to the tshuva that he's doing right now, that he realizes that the source of this is something which I can't break out of. It's because it's me, it's the very essence of the Yid which is one with Hashem. That is the nekuda. The nekuda of tshuva law has to be present and influence, and has to be nirgash in the aveda of tshuva tata itself. So here in Sifyo, the Rebbe brings it back to the pshat and the taich of what it says in the Zoya. Toshav Hey, the Hey, where we're bringing back the Hey to Hashem's name, Yud Kei Vav, the Hey is being connected again. So we see this point in that. The Yeshloimar, as das is the beer, in Aveda, this explains, it's explaining it from the perspective of the Aveda Vayid, was that in from Shuva Tata is nitnar Toshav Hey Tata Mepchines Galus. The point of it here is not only as far as the Shechin is concerned, that when a Yid does an Aveda, he's dragging down the Shechin into a Galus. And when he does Shuva, the Shechin is returning back to its place. The point there is not just to take the Hey out of its Galus, but it's also to reconnect. And this connects back the level of the neshama of the Yid to the Yud Kei and Vav. That's what this tshuva is about. So this is mamish the point that the Rebbe explained before. That inyan von Hey Tata v'zi b'fnei atzma and avedus adam. What does the letter Hey Tata of Hashem's name for itself? What does it represent? Is there bittul the Kabbalah Salmach Hashemayim v'eres mitzad b'chinas haneshama and b'lebeshes b'gof. This is the Kabbalah Soil of a Yid, just relating to that aspect of his existence, his behavior, his ma'aseh b'poil, that he's accepting upon himself, that he's going to do what Hashem wants. That's the Hey for itself. But on Toshav Hey Tatol Mekoimal is Yachid b'Yud Kei Vav, returning the Hey and reconnecting it to the Yud Kei Vav, the higher layers in the neshama of the person, all the way back to the Yud and the Kudeh. So what does this represent as a bittul, the Kabbalah oil? Hey Tata, what this means is that this Kabbalah oil is not only that now the Hey itself is complete, but it also means that this Hey now soll sein in Azaifen, as in ihm soll sich herren, wie ist verbunden und vereizigt mit Bchinas Tachlis HaYichud shemitzad etzan HaNeshama, the ICS Yud Kei Vav. He's returning the Hey to the other letters, meaning that the Kabbalah oil of the Hey itself is based on, and he feels that it's really connected to the Vav before, the Hey before, all the way back to the Yud before, which is the Nukuda of his connection, the Etzem of the Neshama, which is just completely one with Hashem. So in the actual concept of returning the Hey to the Yud Kei Vav, the whole point that the Rebbe is saying here is expressed, that even in the lowest level of Tshuva, you have the influence of the higher levels that it's connecting and becoming one with. So now, based on this, the Rebbe comes back to explain the point of the returning of why this is all relevant for the basic avodah of tshuva. Right? The question that the Rebbe asked in the Sikha is, how could the Rebbe say that all these levels, Al Pi Kabbalah, the deeper levels of tshuva, is relevant for understanding hascholas, mitzvahs, tshuva v'ikra, the main inyan of what tshuva is. So now we have a very clear explanation for this here in Sifir Aleph. By explaining what Shuv is all about, according to Said, returning the Hey, was the mensch darf tun. This adds a deeper understanding to what the mitzvah of tshuva consists of that the person is doing. This is not just a description of the result of tshuva in spiritual realms in Hashem's holy name, but it explains, it brings the person's tshuva to a completely different level of understanding what it's about. By explaining at length, this Hey Tata is not just something for itself. The Hey Tata, it relates to the basic Kabbalah cell and the person's behavior, but that doesn't stand alone. Nor it's continuing and it's bringing down what is there in the previous letters in this tzir, in this place. As as their inyan Tshuva is to umkehren die Heit hatol mekaima, and the Tshuva consists of returning the Hay to its place, wie sie es verbunden mit die andere drei Eisies from Shem Havaya. Andere Eisies from Shem Havaya, connecting it back to the other letters of Hashem's name. Kum zu achidish mitzvah Tshuva. So this brings a whole novel approach to what the basic mitzvah of Tshuva is about. In dem yigmar belibechul, lebal yashav chulu, limred b'machusi is barachulu. The basic tshuva of returning to Hashem, to make a resolution not to rebel against Hashem, it's on a whole new level. As to them, despite the fact, was ikir in yana is the Kabbalah Soil b'negetzes surmira. The main focus here is just the Kabbalah Soil. This is a person thinking about his behavior, and that he does not want to, for no price in the world, rebel against Hashem. That's what the actual tshuva is about. The Bal Yoshuv, limited b'malchus, is but a v'layavred mitzvah samelachas, which shall not actually do an aveda. Heitato. So this heitato, second, heitato darf sie sein verbunden euch mit der avedes, was then is shaykh to the andere is the Shem Havaya. However, this resolution should not just be limited to and focused on here, my behavior, that in my behavior I will not rebel against Hashem, but really it has that takeif, that strength and that connection, realizing that it's based on something much deeper and before, higher. It's the essence really that's being expressed on this level of my behavior. That gives it a much bigger power. Und the far is negate and makdem sein, and therefore it's relevant here to first preface so ascholas mitzvah tshuva ve'ikra. Even when we're speaking about the beginning of tshuva and the primary aveda of tshuva, oich derein from tshuva yilah, even the highest and deepest level of tshuva. Weil die tshuva kipshuta dev zayin in azah oifen as in ear zal zayin nirgesh oich derein from tshuva yilah. Because even on the basic level of tshuva, it has to have the experience and has to have a connection to the source of the tshuva, the essence of the tshuva, the nakuda of the tshuva. So now the Rebbe comes back to explain the language of the Alter Rebbe here in the words that the Rebbe's father stops on, Levayir Heitev Bar Chovas Abir, and then the Alter Rebbe brings the Zohar and he uses the expression Bahaktem Mashakasa B'Zohar. So the Rebbe's question was, is Levayir Heitev Bar Chovas Abir going on what it says in Zohar, or is it something separate and then there's the Bahaktem? Why does the Alter Rebbe say that Bahaktem, sounding like that now we're going to preface something else? The words that Alter Rebbe says, these four words, this corresponds to the two levels of tshuva mentioned later, Toshev Hei Tata and Toshev Hei Ilah, wie gebracht früher von Taten Za'aris, as the Rebbe's father explains. This is not just simply a hint. This is actually explaining what the tshuva itself actually has to consist of, what this tshuva has to contain it, the basic level of tshuva has to contain in it. Right? When the Alter Rebbe says over here, hints to the highest levels of tshuva, so you may think that what the Alter Rebbe is doing is, there's the basic level of tshuva, okay, and that's good, complete. But now let's take this to another level. Let's understand something deeper here based on what it says in the Zohar, what's going on in Elam Yisrael Yainim, and so on. No, the Rebbe's father is saying in these words, Levayir Heitev, Chovas Habior is telling you that we need this explanation for the basic fulfillment of the tshuva. Und der Vater sagt Alter Rebbe Levayir Heitev Chovas Habir behaktem Mashakasa B'Zohar HaKadosh Chulu. Therefore, the Alter Rebbe does say that he's going to explain, and then he adds the word behaktem. By adding that word bahaktim, that he's going to preface now something else, that makes clear durch Meisus and the word bahaktim as levai heter bachavas abir batzitzich nitnor to mashakasa b'zohar HaKadosh, that when he says that he's going to explain, he's not only coming to explain something new and something further on here, vi melent bepashtus, as the simple pshat would be, nor says eichan inyi la'atzmai. The Levayir Heiter B'Chavas Abir is a point for itself, relating to the Haschala of Tshuva that was just mentioned here. B'chdei, as Haschalas Mitzvah Tshuva Ve'ikra, Zol Zayin Be'emes U'B'Leiv Shalem, so that the beginning and the basic level of Tshuva should be really genuine, and with a full heart, to its real utmost level, is Ha'hechrech. So there's a must here, as you soll sein, in dem Eufen, was is merumiz, in dem Lashon, levayir heter barchavas abir. This basic level of tshuva must be permeated with the feeling of the source of this tshuva, which is hinted in these words, levayir heter barchavas abir. So this is not just levayir heter is not just, okay, we're done to understand tshuva, so let's go on to the Zohar, which is, so that's a new dimension of the tshuva. Levayir heter barchavas abir is saying that the basic level of tshuva has to have, you must have in it the source of the tshuva influencing it. Das heißt, so what this means is, trotzdem, despite the fact, was mitzvah tshuva is, sheyigmu belev, if nit moired zayn b'malchusi yisbarach, und nit oive zayn mitzvah melach sur mirah. The basic level of tshuva is to not rebel against Hashem, which is the sur mirah aspect of the tshuva. That's the lowest level of the tshuva in the last hay. Von deswegen darf sein nirgesh in ihr euch der vav. You should sense that this tshuva has a deeper aspect to it. It has the vav in it. That it really comes from the fact that my neshama is ready to leave its limitation. It's ready, the vav hinted to the fact that the person, the levayir, dav zayin hetiv, the levayir, which refers to the malchus, to the lowest aspect of tshuva, has to be influenced by the hetiv. This is well explained, meaning the hetiv, as in the Kabbalah, shaloi limud b'machusi yisbarach daf secheren behelm akaponim, as that is great, that higher connection that's expressed in the Vav, which is the tshuva, where the person is ready to go beyond his nature, even when the person is still dealing with the basic tshuva, trying to connect himself to Hashem with his resolution not to rebel, but he has to realize, this is not my real tshuva, this is, right now I'm at this step, and I'm dealing with this now, but really, in me and the source of this, there's something deeper here. I'm really ready to go beyond my nature. So that also has to, that nekuda has to be there, has to at least influence his thinking. Bedugma is the avodah from vasei tov, like it is in the avodah once the person comes to the level of vasei tov, that deeper level of tshuva. Unachmer, and then furthermore, the levaya dav zayin oich b'harchavas abir, which is leneged toshev hey ilah debina, meaning in the Kabbalah, when the person is still on the basic level of tshuva, accepting not to rebel against Hashem, what he has to feel, at least on some level, in a concealed level, even though it's not the actual thing that he's busy with now, as that is great, is that he's ready to completely open himself up, to put himself aside to Hashem, to be open to Hashem, to be in him, like it happens when a person learns Torah and he allows the words of Hashem to flow through him. So even though he's dealing with one level of tshuva, he shouldn't be restricted and just focused and completely closed up into this level. He has to realize that there's something broader, there's something broader going on over here. This one level that you're focused on is connected to something deeper and even deeper and even deeper, and this all adds to the strength and the involvement in the tshuva, even in the level that he's on now. That's what the Alter Rebbe is saying by adding those words, ha'hechrech levayir heitiv, barchavas abir. It's an inyan for itself to explain what the approach of the ikar of tshuva should be. So now here in Sif Yud Gimel, the Rebbe comes back to answer the original question, why the Alter Rebbe does not hint to the nekuda of tshuva, to the highest level of tshuva, which is in the Yud. This is the explanation. Von dem, for the fact, was is miram is nor the erste drei Darges von Tshuva. The Alter Rebbe here only hints to the first three levels of Tshuva, und is nit miram is euch die Darge von Baal Tshuva lo b'chines Yud. The Alter Rebbe does not hint to the highest and deepest level of Tshuva, the level of Yud and Tshuva. And the reason for this is benigei yatzu ois Yud. When it comes to the level of Yud, the point, the source of Tshuva. This doesn't need a specific focus as he soll sein nirgesh in the Kabbalah lebal yashav chulu limud malchusi yisbarach chulu. That this should be experienced and felt, that what I'm doing now, even though I'm focused only on a resolution regarding my action, regarding my behavior, but nevertheless, he realizes, and it has to be a special focus to think that there's something more here. No, you don't need that here. That is obvious. What in Yonah von Ois Yud is kanal siv zayin the nekudas haskashus. What is the Yud? The Yud here, the highest level of tshuva, is not another level. This is the point of the tshuva. The nekudas haskashus was nit verbunden mit zir. It's not limited to any level. This is the point that's beyond levels and is really the source of all levels. Is the chmuvon, so it's understood as the nekuda heret sechon in jeder Avodah. This is was is verbunden mit die andere drei Esis. That Nekuda is the source and is really the background in every single level. The Nekuda is expressed in one level, the Nekuda could be expressed in another level. The Nekuda itself is beyond levels. When you're in one level or another, so this is how the Nekuda is expressed here in this level. But obviously the Nekuda is the background of it. Is Kanal Siv Zayin, die Hamshacha von der Nekuda in a gewissen Zier. The whole point of each individual level of tshuva is not just this level of tshuva here now. Every level of tshuva is always the Nekuda, that I'm returning to Hashem completely. When the person b'poil is on one level, that Nekuda is expressed on the level that he's on. But the fact that the Nekuda influences the level that he's on, it's not just influences. This is really the basis of what he's doing now. This is the Nekuda of what he's doing now. So therefore, the Alter Rebbe is not hinting that a person has to connect this level to a deeper level, deeper. It's not deeper. This is it. This is really the Nekuda of everything. Now here the Rebbe adds another very powerful point. Ba'adarabbe, on the contrary, mitzad deruf, was euch die Kabbalah, zu nit meiret sein b'machusi is barach is atnuah from bittel. The very first and basic level of tshuva is what? That a person is struggling and he has to accept upon himself not to rebel against Hashem. So this is a real strong concept of bittel. Shalamata mebchinas tzir. And this is below any level where the person can appreciate and understand and relate to the greatness of who Hashem is. On the other levels where a person is really connecting deeper, not just dealing with his simple behavior, but ready to go out of himself and to connect higher, or connect in the world of Torah. Over there, the person is already appreciating the Eibishter on a certain level. But the basic level of Tshuva is just that basic acceptance of a Yid without even appreciating anything. Is dafke in nirgash di etzem nekudas haskashros shalamayla mitzir. This level, the basic level of Tshuva, where the person is tearing himself away from what he's involved in, and he's just doing it because the Eibishter wants, even though I'm not connected on any high level. That level of tshuva is actually expressing this very nekuda. So it's not only that the nekuda is the background and the basis of everything, but dafke in the lowest level of tshuva, you sort of have mamish expressed the deepest level. So the Alter Rebbe doesn't have to hint it that the person has to make an effort to connect to the nekuda. This is the nekuda. Und wie bald, als mit die Werte levai heter b'chovas abir, is the Alter Rebbe mechadesh, wie es darf sein, the losh of chulu b'poyol. So over here, when the Alter Rebbe says these words, levai heter b'chovas abir, the Alter Rebbe is coming to tell you over here a novel idea regarding the actual tshuva that the person is doing here, that it's not only the nekuda of tshuva, which is obviously what every level of tshuva is all about, but here the Alter Rebbe is adding another point, that whatever level of tshuva you're focusing on now, realize that this is not really it. There's something more here. You're connected to something deeper on various stages. The Rebbe sagt as a loschen, was is merame, is none of the erste drei darges. So as far as that tshuva b'poil is concerned, that a person should include more depth and more richness to his tshuva, so the Alter Rebbe adds that you should keep in mind and open yourself up to the deeper elements of tshuva that should influence your tshuva. But that's just regarding the actual tshuva, that a person should allow an expansiveness to his tshuva to open up to additional levels. But the nekuda of tshuva, that's the nekuda. That the Alter Rebbe doesn't mention at all. That is the very nekuda itself of tshuva, and therefore there's no hint for this in the words of the Alter Rebbe here. So here, I'm sure you learned the sikha. If you learned, this is unbelievable. You have here a completely new appreciation, understanding what tshuva is all about on all levels. So very, very, very comprehensive over here in this sikha.